Welcome to PD on the Go, the podcast that delivers bite-sized learning on communication, collaboration, and facilitation for busy teacher leaders. Tune in while you're in the car, on your lunch break, or making copies, and get ready to level up your leadership skills. My name is Mary Beth Anderson, and I'm joined today by my colleagues from the Office of Professional Learning in Fairfax County Public Schools. We're welcoming back our educational specialists from the Great Beginnings team.
Hi, I'm Katie Eustace.
I'm Jenna Reeder.
I'm Meg Michelli.
All right, so today we're talking about collective responsibility. So we hear a lot in Fairfax County, and I'm sure people hear this across our country, about how teachers need to have collective responsibility for students. And your team talks about the importance of collective responsibility for new teachers. And so Jenna, can you tell me a little bit more about exactly what you mean when you share this?
Sure. The goal of when we think about new teachers, our primary goal is retention. We want to keep teachers in the profession. But when we think about the school level, the goal is not just to keep the teacher in the profession, but it's also to keep them at the school. And so for a very long time, when we've talked about what supports a new teacher gets at the school level, we've solely talked about a mentor. And said you're going to be assigned a mentor. This mentor is going to be your touchstone. It's going to be the support for you during the year. And one of the things we've thought a lot about over the last 5 or so years that we've really expanded our thinking and our guidance around is how do you create a culture of collective responsibility at your school so that the responsibility isn't only falling on that one person? Because research has shown that, teachers really place a lot of value on the culture of their school and really say that is a reason that they stay at a school. Right. So they want to feel like they belong, they want to feel like they're welcome, and that is the job of everyone in the building to make that culture happen.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, Katie's her mentor. She'll take care of her. I don't need to help her out. Or, when I think about like the very first school that I worked at, it was all the people around me that even said hi to me down in the kindergarten hall who I never saw, but helped make that connection for me. Yeah.
What's so important about what Jenna's saying too is that, having that group or having that collective effort of everybody is so important because of the profession that we work in. So in the field of education, it's very unique, as we all know, sitting around this table and all of the listeners here know. I think about it like being in medical school. You go through medical school, you get trained to do surgeries, whatever it might be, and then on the first day, they don't put you in an OR by yourself doing the most complicated surgery, while the person next to you who's been doing this for 20 years is doing a much easier one because they've done their time. And yet in education, we kind of think about it as the opposite, where I'm a veteran teacher, I have done my time, I have survived this far, so I might want to get the classroom that's a little bit closer to the copy room, or I might want to get something, maybe potentially an easier class list or something along those lines. But just kind of thinking about what shelters we can put in place for new teachers to kind of protect them, because they really are, when they're coming in, brand new, and yet we hand them the exact same workload that we are handing someone who's been doing that job for 20 years.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Meg, like thinking about that analogy, because in education, it is so different from any other profession that we expect a teacher on day one to do the same thing as a teacher on year 30. And so, what are those shelters? And what do you, what can you say a little bit more about, that shelter and development?
Sure.
Katie?
So when we're thinking about new teacher support, we can put those supports into 2 different categories based on their purpose. I'll start with development. So typically when we think about new teacher support, we think about development, like how do we teach them how to do the job? How do we teach them how to teach reading? How do we teach them classroom management? And those are really critically important things. On the other side of new teacher support, we have shelters. And so that's really the idea of how are we simplifying the job for them while they're in this incredibly vulnerable state of being a first or second year teacher. What are the things we're intentionally doing to temporarily reduce some of the workload where we can to make the job a little bit simpler so they're not as overwhelmed and they can actually access the development that we want. We can't PD away the overwhelm, really. And so some examples of shelters might be like thinking about where you're putting their classroom. Are they next to the people who are teaching similar things to them, so that they have, even if it's not their official mentor next door, it's somebody who can answer those quick questions? Are we thinking about how many preps they have in secondary? So are we giving them 4 different preps, or are we giving them, 2 preps? Are we, if they're doing if they're in a team taught classroom, how are we thinking about the person that we're pairing them with in that team taught classroom? If we're looking at class numbers on a class list, maybe they're not going to have as many students in their classroom as some of the more veteran teachers, with the understanding that when they have a few fewer kids on their caseload, they might have a little bit more capacity to learn that job. And I think what's really important about shelter is it's not a permanent piece, and that's a conversation you have with the new teacher. You're very intentional and say, so for this time period, and define the time period, you're going to have this experience so that you can, have a little bit more capacity to learn something that's a little bit more challenging for you right now. So it's really this idea that we simplify for a little while and we gradually replace that shelter with more development as their capacity grows.
It's like scaffolds.
It's
we put
exactly
in
like
place for
scaffolds.
kids.
Exactly.
It
And
makes
scaffolds
me-
are temporary.
Right, exactly. They're meant to be
Hopefully.
taken away.
Yes.
Like, makes me think the first year I was on a team and I really didn't have a lot to offer at my collaborative learning team meeting. And so I was always like, I'll make the copies. Like, that was my
Copies are
contribution,
important.
because we know new teachers, they're ready to come in. They're excited
Yes.
about doing the work, but it's like, I didn't make the copies for 5 years. It was just
Right.
as I was getting my feet under me.
Right.
So shelter is a little bit different in the way of development, which is more of the professional learning
Yes,
that
exactly.
we might be providing teachers.
Yep.
Okay, so any other examples of ways that teachers are marigolds, like we talked about on our episode last week, that they can put into place as a team? So if I'm on a team with a new teacher, I'm not their mentor, but I want to be able to, like, may not have access to where would their classroom be, or preps, or I don't have master schedule capacity. What are some of the other things that we might be able to do?
I think some of it is about having an open door policy where, again, maybe I'm not your mentor, but you know that I'm available to answer your questions. I think even just at a team meeting, it's making sure that you ask for that new teacher's input, and making sure that everyone is acknowledging that you have something to contribute. Even if you might be a novice, you still have things to contribute, and inviting them into the conversation instead of making assumptions that, oh, well, you don't have enough experience or you don't know enough. What can you contribute to this conversation or to this team? I think the positive presupposition that you do have ideas and that you want to be a part
And a
of
fresh
it.
perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, inviting their voice in.
Steal something actually from our coworker Hallie, because I was working with her on a coaching PD, and we were talking about the idea that a lot of our new teachers, they don't have that expert voice you were just talking about, right, in the back of their head, but that doesn't mean that they can't be part of bigger conversations. And so Hallie was talking to me about how, well, you could create this menu of options that they could choose from, and it doesn't mean that you're handing them an answer if they have the autonomy and the choice of that menu. And so that really changed my perspective on a shelter could just be providing options. We think about kids in the
Yes.
classroom,
So you're
right?
not overwhelmed
Right.
by all the
When
choices.
it's so overwhelming, to just give it a completely open-ended opportunity, sometimes we need to provide those scaffolds, those structures that are temporary, so that they feel like they have the efficacy to choose.
And I think, so being the elementary representative to the Great Beginnings team, I was just even thinking about something that you could talk to your teammates about would be providing some recess coverage so they could have a little bit more time to, like, and again, I think you need to be clear that this is like a temporary thing. This is not a forever thing, but just offering up, like, taking turns covering their class at recess so that they can have a little bit of extra time to insert all of the things that teachers have to do, like make copies or get ready for science that day. I think could be a relatively simple shelter that a team could share that responsibility for.
I also think taking the idea of collective responsibility again to the school level and thinking about who are the resources that you have in place that are not classroom teachers. Who are your librarians, your SPITs, if you have a reading or math specialists, if you have an instructional coach, even, I mean, up to, I guess, your admin. How are they a part of a new teacher's growth and development? If a new teacher is, struggling with classroom management, who's the MTSS person that is the, the expert on MTSS that can come in. If they're struggling with the reading instruction, that they know they can go to the reading specialist. The reading specialist has made themselves available, is a touch point, is someone who's introduced themselves, who has dropped in to say hi, has offered ideas and resources so that they know this is a person that I can go to when I, am challenged by something specific.
Yeah, I love that.
I know we got to be on the go. But one of there's an elementary school in our school division where the principal has made some really intentional decisions that for the first few weeks of school, all of his instructional staff who are not in the master schedule, who do not have classroom responsibilities, are in the classrooms with the novice teachers from minute one of school arriving. And his reasoning behind that is if a kid gets a cut in the first 30 minutes of the day, and you haven't thought as a new teacher, oh my gosh, where are the Band-Aids? Like, I don't even know how to do this. There's someone in the room who can help with that. Or if maybe things are a little chaotic, there's a model for that new teacher of how do I provide directions? How do I rein the class back in? And it's that immediate feedback and that immediate opportunity to really set them up for success and feel more confident. And the new teachers know that it's not going to be a forever thing, but that they have somebody else in their classroom. So I remember my first day teaching fourth grade. My kids hadn't arrived yet, and I was thinking to myself, who thought this was a good idea? Like, it's just going to be me, like just me who thought this was
surgeon.
Right. Like who thought this was the right idea? And so I think that's just a really, it's an idea where there are a lot of people in school buildings the first couple weeks of school who maybe don't have the same kinds of responsibilities they have later on in the year and have more flexibility, who can provide that in-classroom support from really minute one.
Yeah, and it just shows this like all hands on deck approach.
And it provides then I get to know, say Jenna's my reading specialist. She was in with me. When I start having questions about reading instruction, I don't need to go to my mentor. I can go to my buddy.
Yeah, that's great. I think we've come up with so many. I mean, but these are so many good ideas that it can be as a whole school that you're on board with this, or even just me as one listener from one school to start that conversation and support our new teachers that way. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll share some resources on our PLC site as well as on our Instagram page at FCPS_PD. Thanks for joining us and tune in next week.